Welcome to the Look-See for September 2023. This is a combination of news, views, and intuition that aims to make you look a little deeper, think a little more broadly, and be a little sassy as you move through life. There's a lot going on, and it's moving more quickly than some people are comfortable with. So just get quiet inside and observe. Put on some quiet music and go wash your socks. Or make a cup of tea and go enjoy the beauty of Mother Nature. If neither of those work, go lose yourself in a good book. If all else fails, go watch some cat videos and laugh until you cry. Worry never solved a single problem. So let's look at the future coming at us, or rather, the future we are helping to shape by our action or perhaps our inaction. So, number one, in going through my mail recently, I saw an email from one of those companies that keeps track of the imaginary score called your credit score. I was in the process of deleting it when I suddenly saw that the whole credit score game was about to come to an end. It looked like the whole thing just kind of slowly fell apart, fell into disarray and uselessness, like it had no relevance. This was taking place over the next 2 years. And I wasn't going to put that in the look-see because it was so far in the future, but I changed my mind because I think a lot of people are held hostage by their credit scores. And it occurred to me that maybe this bit of news might be helpful. Once in a while, I will say to someone that I don't know why people play that credit score game. And in response, I get an entire lecture on issues like the difficulty of buying a car or getting a loan, getting a mortgage, or being able to get a credit card. And that always reminds me that a lot of people have not reached the point where they have taken their life and its direction into their own hands. They haven't set their life up to be free from all of that. So let me encourage you. Make a decision to get out of the debt game. Get off the debt grid. It's a rigged game. You don't have to instantly figure out how to do that. Just make the decision and begin thinking about it. Soon, you'll begin to find ways to play the game your way. Number two, I keep seeing bits and pieces of something having to do with government. Something that is so big and so overwhelming that I hardly know what to say about it. It comes in and then it fades away, and then it comes back, and then it fades away again, which would suggest several things. One, that a clear course of action has not been chosen, or a final decision has not been made, or perhaps that this is something the greater population is holding in their consciousness and wants to happen, but is afraid to say or do anything to make it happen. Anyway, when it comes in clearly, it looks like total reorganization. It looks like an overhaul. It looks like Biden is suddenly being removed in a dramatic way. And this is followed by a big scramble in Washington, D.C. Then the whole thing fades out, and when it returns, it looks like the overhaul involves several governments that are going through this at the same time we are. And I end up uncertain as to whether what I'm seeing is happening here or some other country. And then it fades for a while, but then more bits and pieces come in. And I'm seeing and feeling that this reorganization, this I'll call it an operation to reorganize, is being carried out prematurely. as if it was in the planning stages, but the damage being done by the present administration was deemed to be so severe that whoever is carrying out the operation decided it was too risky to wait. Then it fades out again. But then later it comes back, and I see that the entire reorganization is connected to both parties in the US and several big issues. One party, the left, hopes to avoid further bad press and bad attitudes from constituents, as well as the effort to avoid complete destruction of the democratic illusion, the DNC, and all because they want to keep the two-party system going. Those on the right want to avoid a rebellion or revolution by the people of the US. They want to keep the two-party system going as well, and to avoid civil war in the US. And they want to keep the government gravy train going. Another even bigger reason for the sudden reorganization is to head off a nuclear conflict with Russia, yet keep the war in Ukraine going, because it's a huge source of money for the deep state, which is hoping to make things settle down until they can get full control again, figure out a narrative that everyone agrees with, and carry forward with their plans to clean the planet and control everything. Now, a side comment I would make is that I have always had the perception that the deep state was pulling some strings, at least a few strings in government. But one of the scenes I saw several times was that the deep state has everyone in government over a barrel, everyone, and threatens them constantly with exposure and loss of income. So it was as if they are not just getting paid to do as they're told or vote as they're told. They have something shameful to hide. So it's an easy choice for those in government. They just have to do as directed and get paid. And so they do. Another reason for the reorganization has something to do with China, as if trying to keep from going to war with China just yet, but keeping that option open so they can play that card when they're ready. This entire set of scenes came again and again over the last 2 weeks. And as I watched, it always felt as if this whole unraveling was imminent, just about to happen. So going back to what I said at the beginning, this could be something taking shape in the consciousness of the people because of the way those images faded in and out. However, the entire feeling was get ready, be prepared. Things are about to change. When I tried to get a date for any of this, September 23rd kept coming up. I wasn't sure if this was this September or next September, but I will remind you, the bigger the change, the earlier the information comes in. Why? Because consciousness is always trying to prepare you for what is coming and makes sure you get the information in time to do what's needed in order to continue life. Heads up there. Number 3. I mentioned in number 2 above that there were other governments with big changes happening internally, just like ours. Those governments were Russia, England, South Africa, Germany, France, and Canada. It was as if the Russians were being attacked internally and the other countries were reorganizing because of the sudden abandonment of some policy or narrative. Number 4, a comment. I have to make this comment on the death of Yevgeny Prigozhin. When I heard about his death, my instant gut reaction was, oh, the US got to him. Now, the story pushed by the US was that Prigozhin was taken out by Putin as punishment for leading the supposed but very short-lived coup against Russia back on the 23rd of June. At that time, the US media hyped that coup story, showed photos of the military vehicles headed toward Moscow, made up all kinds of stories about why Prigozhin was attacking. And then, oops, suddenly the whole thing stopped. Apparently, Prigozhin changed his mind. Western media was left looking like fools. The story put out by Al Jazeera was that Prigozhin decided to halt the attack on Moscow because it might cause bloodshed. Now, isn't that quite an astounding decision, given the slaughter and the bloodshed he just led in Ukraine as the head of the Wagner Group? So I think what is closer to the truth is that Prigozhin accepted a large chunk of money, a bribe, to go after Putin. In fact, that's been reported in several places. He took that $6 billion bribe, pretended to mount a coup so that it would look like he tried to do as agreed, but in the background, he handed the money over to Putin and told him the whole story behind the pretend coup. This left both Putin and Prigozhin in a pickle. Putin was expected to punish Prigozhin for the attempted coup. Instead, Putin supposedly sent him into exile in Belarus. To my way of thinking, this left Prigozhin like a sitting duck whose story could be spun in a dozen directions. But if Prigozhin was in exile in Belarus, what was he doing on a plane that left Moscow headed for St. Petersburg in Russia? Anyway, when the plane went down like a stone about 100 miles north of Moscow last month, everyone was led to think that Putin took him out. However, it looks to me like the US took him out for betraying them after they gave him $6 billion to challenge Putin. Again and again, I am reminded of the old saying, lie down with dogs, get up with fleas. Governments are like old dogs. Anyone who tries to work with them ends up with fleas and often dead. Number 5. Last month, I talked about job losses in the 10 most important sectors of our economy. And I'm wondering what the percentage of jobs lost would be if the energy grid goes down. It's time for us to be thinking of making sure we have some backup power for our individual homes. One of the things I see repeatedly in the future and have for a long time is that there is no big nationwide energy system. Every home and every business is responsible for generating its own energy needs. This leads to a period of extraordinary innovation and the discovery of lots of ways to harness energy, which in turn leads to whole new ways of manufacturing, which in turn leads to the abandonment of wasteful manufacturing, new kinds of housing, new ways of living, and on and on. So let's start thinking in that direction. Get some backup power. Number 6. The financial system is surrounded by chaos and uncertainty, and everyone expects it to collapse. But I keep seeing that the hidden controllers absolutely do not want a collapse, because that would mean the end of their income streams. They are trying to slowly and carefully move everyone into central bank digital currencies but I think that will finish them off just as quickly as a collapse. Why? Because a lot of people will begin to trade outside the official money system, and a huge barter system will develop quickly. I have already mentioned in former look-sees that people will begin to look at their stuff as money, and they'll do quite well trading stuff. Old people with stuff in their basement or their attic will get these things out, and they will trade with younger people who need that kind of stuff, whereas the older folks are past the need for it. And this will bring people into close personal contact with one another. It will awaken or reawaken a sense of brotherhood, a sharing of common experience, and an interest in working and learning together. In the same way that the controllers grossly underestimated the resilience of the Russian economy and their ability to withstand and go beyond sanctions, they will underestimate the American people and their resilience and their ability to reorganize as they decide it's not the nation state that must survive, it's the people that must survive. People will begin reorganizing their lives as part of the need to take down the old structures of governance and finance in order to destroy the pipelines feeding the ogre behind the curtain, the deep state. Number 7, on the subject of CBDCs. This week, I went to pay my bills, which I usually do using an online bill payer from, well, I won't say from, you'll have to look at the written version to see where from, what bank I'm referring to. To my surprise, I couldn't get into my account unless I signed something called a Digital Services Agreement. Digital Services Agreement. I was extremely frustrated because I couldn't even look at the balance unless I was willing to sign the agreement. It was like a paywall that I couldn't get beyond. I ended up refusing to sign it. Instead, I decided to download and read the agreement. It's 125 pages long, and I'm not finished with it yet, but I have learned a couple of things I think are important to share. The first is that the banking system is suddenly taking all of their digital platforms very seriously, as if they are separate businesses. It's as if they are suddenly realizing that they have a whole lot of financial media type sites out there. And if you want to use them, you need to sign up as if you're a brand spanking new customer signing up for their app. Thinking back, first it was the ATM machine and the debit card to make it convenient to deposit or withdraw money and cut foot traffic in the bank, in the lobby, so you didn't have to wait in line. Then it was the online bill payer to make it easy to pay your bills and manage your money. Then it was the remote deposit of checks, or the instant transfer without fees, or having to write a check. So these services are no longer just part of the banking system options for managing your money. They are new and separate businesses with fees and conditions that you must subscribe to if you want to use them. In effect, the banks are putting our money behind a paywall, and they're going to deduct the fees for these services from whatever's in your account to make sure you pay them. Not only that, you must agree that they can impose additional charges, penalties, or fees at any time. So let me reiterate. This means you must now sign up for these services if you want online access to your personal accounts, mobile access to your personal accounts, online access to your business accounts, business payer or bill payer services, point of sale use, Zelle money transfers, and any wire transfers. The Digital Services Agreement is just like all the other services that tell you to just click the button that says agree, or don't use their software. The big difference, however, is that those other services don't have all your money in their pocket. You at least have a choice as to whether or not to click on the button, the agree button. But not with this situation. The bank has all of your money, and they won't let you do anything with it unless you click on their agree button. This is not something they give you any warning about or any time to think about. One day I could pay my bills and access my money, and the next day I couldn't. I felt like I had been taken hostage. I think we can still go to the bank and carry out our financial responsibilities, but as I contemplate this option, I imagine long lines stretching out the bank door and down the sidewalk. Even then, when you go to the bank and tell them you want to deposit or withdraw money, what is the first thing they say to you? It is, put your card into the machine. Does that count as an online service? We could return to using checks to pay for everything, but what about all those places that no longer want to accept checks? The next thing this new Digital Services Agreement requires is that your communication service provider, attention there, communication service provider, will now become your agent. You must let the bank know immediately if you change your phone number, email address, delivery location, or your internet service provider. And you must accept the fact that the bank is going to communicate with you through whatever mobile service you use, quote, without necessarily encrypting personal or confidential information, including account activity and status, end quote. If your internet service is down or your phone service has difficulty, you may have difficulty or delay in accessing or moving your money, and it's not the bank's fault or their problem. On top of this, if you use an internet service or phone service that the bank does not approve of, it's not their problem if that service is not compatible with their digital platforms. After saying all of these things, the bank goes on to say that not all services and functions will work on all mobile devices, but that's also your problem, not theirs. It looks to me like they are differentiating here between online services accessed using a computer and mobile services accessed via phone or tablet. And what they're saying is, get a computer. We are not a software company trying to make sure our software is compatible with every kind of device out there. Next, they insist on access to whatever wireless carrier we use. This is your phone service, like Verizon or T-Mobile. And if we want to use their digital services, we must authorize our phone service to use or disclose information about us and our phone. This includes at least name, billing address, email, phone number, and your location. The above conditions are followed by a couple of doozies. One is that any communication or material that we transmit to the bank via the digital services platforms will be non-confidential and they can use it for any purpose, including reproduction, publication, broadcast, and posting. And of course, they claim they will only do so in relation to reasonable business practices, but the wording here is extraordinarily unbalanced, unfair to the people, and all the power is on the bank's side of the agreement. Another doozy is that, and I quote, all scheduled fund transfer requests referenced in this agreement, for example, bill payments, transfers, Zelle, wires, etc., are subject to internal review, including but not limited to fraud review and, where applicable, for compliance with OFAC or other regulations. This includes review of the recipient of your transaction, and your transaction may be delayed or held and not approved. Held and not approved? Does this mean they're going to take the money and not put it back if they don't approve of who you are sending money to? Wow. This is like having fact checkers for the banking system. Actually, it's worse. And FYI, OFAC stands for the Office of Foreign Assets Control. And they are the ones who decide whether or not someone is a terrorist, a trafficker, or an SDN. An SDN is an individual or company listed as a specifically designated national, whose assets are blocked and with whom we are generally prohibited from doing business. In addition to deciding who we can do business with, the bank is also reserving the right to make changes in the entire agreement, update, discontinue, or modify the digital platforms at any time at their discretion. The bottom line here is that all of the warnings we have been hearing about for several years are now in operation. The structure is in place for imposing CBDCs and the complete control of us and our money. Heads up. Where is your money? And what do you need to do? Number 8. I keep watching for signs that an official UFO disclosure or even a fake alien attack is coming, but I don't see it. Maybe it's too far away to see much. I can see the ongoing setup for a fake alien attack, but it does not seem imminent. Be aware that the reason the government has carefully hidden their energy-based weapons and denied the presence of UFOs until recently was because they were planning to use these in the fake alien attacks. And they can't plausibly do that if everyone knows we already have those kinds of weapons and craft. Number 9. The population of the U.S. is finally grasping the truth about Ukraine, the danger of nuclear confrontation, and the role of our government in pushing us toward such a disaster. I hope at least some of you are aware that the people of Russia are very, very angry with us, with the U.S., and they are calling for a nuclear attack to destroy us, to stop what we're doing in Ukraine. This is being talked about in many places outside the U.S., but the American population seems oblivious. As I read the news elsewhere and tune into the energy of people in other nations, it's clear that the anger is building. So if you have any time and energy to sit down and imagine sending love and peace and whatever other good things you can think of to the people of Russia and Ukraine, then do so. If you know how to pray, then do so. If you know how to work as a spirit guide, then do so. There's a lot of healing that is going to be needed. Number 10. After reading a report in the Gateway Pundit that after the Lahaina fire, 2,000 children were missing from Maui schools, I went looking for data showing school enrollment and whether or not it was up, down, or steady elsewhere in our country. This resulted in a little bit of data, which I will read in a moment, but what followed this research a few days later was a vision. It was a vision of schools closing suddenly in various places, even in the middle of a semester. This vision was incredibly similar to the remote viewing done by Dick Allgaier, in which he saw men crying, vomiting, stunned because something was closing for the last time. I think he was looking at government. However, I was looking at schools. Teachers were crying, principals were vomiting, superintendents were on their knees sobbing. Children and young people were left dangling. And when I tried to ask what time frame I was looking at, it appeared to be next year, so not real close. We do have time to make plans and to rethink what we are doing with our children and education. So a couple of data points in terms of us, people on the move, where people are going. In Michigan, school enrollment was down 165,000 students over 13 years. In California, student enrollment was down 150,000 over 2 years. Kansas dropped 8,000 students over 2 years. New York lost 190,711 students over, I think, about 5 years. So, and everywhere I looked, enrollment in schools was moving steadily downwards. So I thought, where are they going? And so I found, here's where people are going. The top 10 states with the biggest gains in enrollment were Nevada, up 21%, Alaska, up 18%, Arizona, up 19%, Utah, up 17%, Colorado student enrollment, up 11%, Idaho enrollment, up 12%, Florida, up 13%, Texas, up 13%, Minnesota, up 11%, and Maryland, up 13.5%. So people are moving. We are on the move. Number 11. As I was working on this look-see, I happened to hear an announcement from the governor of New Mexico that guns were being banned. So if this is a test run of the deep state's ability to make proclamations that get around the Constitution, it will fail miserably. As I looked at this, when I heard that, I thought, I have to go look at this. Where is this going? And so as I looked at it a little deeper, it was the beginning of a fairly widespread expansion of public resistance to the destructive agenda now unfolding in the US across the board. More and more people who are in alignment with the Constitution, truth, fairness, and an honest legal system begin taking a stand against those who represent oppression, relentless control, and disregard for humanity and our laws. It looked like once a few people stood up, others were encouraged to stand up and just say no. This spread from not only saying no to gun control, but to masks, medical ID, mandated shots, and other ridiculous demands for subservience. Number 12. I'd like to point out a couple of common sense observations about Hurricane Dora that was said to have caused the high winds on Maui the day of the Lahaina fires? First, the fires started on the night of August 8th, 2023. At that time, Hurricane Dora was about 250 miles wide, 250 miles in diameter, which is about 125 miles in radius. So that means the wind stretching out from the center of the storm would have a reach of about 125 miles. Keeping that in mind, here's a report from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center the night the fires started. 11 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, August 8th, 2023. It gives the location of the storm. It's 11.4 degrees north, 162.1 degrees west. It's 740 miles southwest of Honolulu, Hawaii. Its maximum sustained winds are 130 miles per hour. Its present movement is directly west at 23 miles per hour. The minimum central pressure is 953 millibars, and there are no coastal watches or warnings in effect for Hawaii. Maximum sustained winds are near 130 miles per hour in the center with higher gusts. Dora is a Category 4 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. Some gradual weakening is forecast over the next 48 hours. Hurricane force winds extend outward up to 30 miles from the center. And tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 115 miles. So, another report on August 10th from the same Central Pacific Hurricane Center says Dora continues to exceed expectations regarding intensity due to its small size. And an environment of light vertical wind shear and relatively warm water of around 28 degrees. So, what questions come up when reading these reports? First, the hurricane was 740 miles south and west of Honolulu and moving further west at 23 miles an hour. So, at 23 miles an hour, by the next morning, it would have been another 100, 200 miles further southwest. Okay, so first of all, the hurricane was 740 miles south and west of Honolulu and moving further west. That means the storm had already passed the Hawaiian Islands altogether. Next, the news media reported that the high winds on Maui were caused by Hurricane Dora, which was, quote, about 500 miles southwest of Maui. Honolulu and Lahaina are only about 80 miles apart. So did the mainstream news just exaggerate how close Dora was to Maui by chopping off 240 miles from the 740 miles reported by the Hurricane Center? Did they do this in order to make it seem more plausible that Dora was the problem causing the wind? Lastly, if Dora was small in size and her tropical force winds, 39 to 74 miles per hour, extended out 115 miles, and if there were no coastal watches or warnings in effect, how likely was Dora to have caused high winds in Maui? This would be like trying to convince us that a storm in Chicago is causing chaos in Oklahoma City. Officials claimed there was a pressure gradient difference that created the winds, And there may have been some pressure gradient difference, and that may have had some effect. But the whole story of Dora as a cause for the high winds just feels like it's been manufactured. Something convenient thrown in there for effect or to back something up. Just like a lot of the stories about the weather, the false flags, the climate change, and other modern myths. Number 13. Lastly, a report from John Peterson at the Arlington Institute relayed the information that scientists are beginning to create materials by changing the dimensional state in which those materials are formed. Wow. One of the things I've talked about in the past is that of materials science. When I was with the little men in brown robes and we went into the future, I witnessed manufacturing in the future. This involved the aggregation of frequencies inside a chamber that I ended up calling a manifestation chamber. The frequencies were created to form specific patterns that then produced matter. The matter, the material form that I saw being produced was a section of housing. It was some kind of combination of glass and or ceramic panel composed of distinct layers of material, and each layer had a specific function. I don't recall the specific layer or the specific function of every layer, but I do remember that one layer collected light and made it available to the interior of the house. Another layer routed energy used to produce heat. A different layer used that same energy to produce cooling. Another functioned as like an air purifier. And yet another as a generator of frequencies that promoted human health and balanced physical function. And then there was the outer layer that acted like an external mirror that allowed people inside the house to see outside, but those who were outside the house could not see in. There were probably 8 or 10 layers altogether, and I'm not sure what they all did, but maybe one of those other layers was insulation. At any rate, the little men explained that we would learn to do this, or would take the first steps toward this kind of manufacturing in my lifetime. So check out this article in Popular Mechanics. Scientists create a remarkable material using the fourth dimension. In sum, the article says, A, the fourth dimension isn't something we can perceive, but it can still be an important tool for physicists. B, scientists from the University of Missouri used a 4D synthetic dimension to develop a material that can control energy waves on the surface of solid material. That's huge. If you can control the way energy waves move over the surface of material and how they interact, you can create invisibility. And C, such a breakthrough could have implications for quantum computing and help provide safer engineering techniques in earthquake-prone areas. In other words, we are beginning to arrange frequency fields into specific configurations, having a higher signature than what we would usually find in the 3D world. This allows us to create new materials called metamaterials with new characteristics and behaviors. So, we are on our way to the fourth dimension. Hang in there, people. It will be a whole new world. So number 14, in tandem with that whole new world, I have a brief announcement to make. And Kimberly Montgomery of prettyover50.com and I are going to start a series of live streams, one each month, titled Shaping a New Reality, From Mind to Matter. And in these live streams, we're going to take one of the topics that came up in the look-see and discuss how to deal with that situation. What kinds of thinking and perception it requires. What kind of inner work or what kind of action steps we can take. So you're invited to join. Join us and put in your 2 cents, your suggestions, your ideas, comments, and questions. And the link to join is going to be on my website. And Kimberly and I are both going to put the link in the newsletters we send out. So the first live stream will be on Monday, September 25th at 7 p.m. So it'll be announced again a couple times before the 25th. So if you're interested in helping to shape a new world, sometimes referred to as a new earth or a new reality, look for that link and join us. So that's it for this look-see. And for those who are watching or listening for the first time, the look-see is a brief look at what's happening in our world and where the big trends are headed. Reality is not fixed. It's very dynamic, and it changes. It changes according to what we're doing with consciousness. Nothing becomes real until we make it real. We make a choice, we take some kind of action, we put something together, or we take something apart. Those decisive actions are what determine the path and the outcome for all of us. And, of course, once we put something in motion, it takes a lot to make a change or get things going in another direction, especially when you're talking about a whole planet full of people. Remember, if we are looking ahead and we don't like what we see, we can make appropriate changes in a timely way without feeling rushed or pressured or frightened. And we can make those changes gracefully, even if we find we must prepare for something that looks inevitable. So in addition, if we see something we like, we can put some conscious attention on that outcome and help it along. In a physical reality system, there will always be a lot of energetic structures working together and tightly bonded to one another. Things don't change instantly in a physical system unless you change the energetic relationships. And we don't do that very well yet. So we're learning, and people are discovering that the best place to start changing those energetic relationships is in your consciousness. But we have a ways to go. We are still at the stage of trying to change the material objects and their relationships, which is why bombs and guns are the most common tools for doing so. Anyway, I'll just say it's important to look ahead and assess what's happening and where we are going so we know whether or not we need to do something different. So thank you so much for listening, and be aware that we have reached the point of peak confusion. We are sitting at the top of the mountain, and there's quite a new view. We can see everything. We can see what's going on. And we are about to start sliding down the other side of the mountain. So be prepared for a little acceleration and watch out for those hairpin turns. Remember, this is our world. Try to enjoy the thrill of the ride. Thank you so much. Have a great month. Make a great month.